Dermot from the Walking Music Star, and you're very welcome to the GOMA Gallery of Modern Art here in Lambert Street in Waterford, where for the next half an hour, 40 minutes or so, depending on what way the conversation goes, we're going to be talking to Anna O'Rourke of Tiafi, and Ben Hennessy, who's obviously on exhibition here at the moment. And they both have a very interesting story to tell about Anne's work in Turkey and how Ben has become involved from an artistic perspective over the last year, and will be travelling out to Izmir again. So Anne, first of all, it's actually nice to finally meet you. We've spoken on the phone at length 3 times in the past 2 years. And we were talking before we started recording here that just how difficult it is in terms of the news cycle at the moment, dominated by the pandemic as it has been for the past 21 months, that the crisis that continues to exist on the border between Syria and Turkey, and in Turkey itself, has more or less gone under the radar here, and particularly in the last 12-18 months. I suppose it's very hard to characterise in a discussion like this just how difficult it is, but I suppose maybe the first thing to ask is, how have you ended up going from South Parade out to Izmir and spending most of your time one end here to the other out there now?
I retired, I tried to retire about 5 years ago. It lasted about a month, I think, and that was enough. And I saw the situation, with all these people trying to get from Turkey to Greece and all these people drowning. And I remember I was sitting watching the television and I thought, maybe I can do something, because everybody can do something, everybody has an ability. So I thought, okay, let's see if I can do something. So I remember sitting and talking to my husband Tom and saying to him, I'm going to Greece, and he thought I was going on holidays, And I said, no, I'm going to go to help these people. So I did, and Tom came with me, and we went to the islands. We went to one of the islands, and we worked in an old mental hospital there. And the people were coming in, and they were wet from coming in from the sea, and some of their relatives had drowned, some of their wives or children had drowned. So it was a very sad and difficult experience when you come face to face with something like that, and the reality really hits you, So we worked there for a while, and we would help these people and bring them in and try and find somewhere to stay, and then try and see what we could do to help them. And then we went from there, and I went to Athens to see what was going on in Athens, and Athens then was equally as bad. When people were leaving the islands, when people got to the islands, they thought that everything was safe and everything was good, and they were in Europe and everything was flying, they were going to fly. Then they go to the mainland, and they're very excited to go to the mainland, and I wanted to see what happened when they got to the mainland. And when they got to the mainland, they ended up on a very big harbour, that's a commercial harbour with huge big boats coming in, massive big boats coming in, trucks flying up and down constantly, and they were all in small tents. Maybe 4,000 or 5,000 of these people were in these small tents on this harbour that was a working harbour, so that was really difficult. And a lot of them, so the first day I remember there was about 4,500 people in a queue for food, just for bread and an egg, I think, and an apple. So they would queue up maybe for 3 hours, And anyway, then from there, I went from there to the Macedonia border. And the Macedonia border was where I saw people standing, hoping to get across the border. I mean, all it is a fence, And on the other side, they were throwing shooting rubber bullets at them, and also the whole thing was just unbelievable. I thought I was in a war zone. It was horrible, right? I couldn't believe I was in Europe for what I was seeing. So there was 14,000 people there. So you can imagine the line got longer for food. Anyway, after that then I decided I would go to, there was quite a lot of help at that stage because it was popular and everybody wanted to, a lot of young people out there helping. And I decided maybe it would be better if I went to Turkey, because there's 4 million refugees in Turkey. So I headed back to Turkey. I had known Turkey and I knew a lot of areas there, so I decided I'd try to do some work there. And the best thing to do really was to find the most vulnerable, and the most vulnerable were the women and children. So these are women that come across the border, no husbands, dead or missing in Syria, and they'd have small children. So some of them are like 27, 26 years of age. They've never worked outside the home. They don't speak the language. They knew nobody in Turkey. They didn't even know, they never presumed they would ever be outside Syria. They'd have no family, absolutely no money. And they're standing there, you know, alone with small children, have no idea where to go, what to do. And of course the traffickers are following them, and they're just waiting for an opportunity to find a way to use these women again. So I decided that Izmir was an area that I knew, so I went to Izmir, and that's where we set up Tiafi. So Tiafi is it's a 1,400 square metre old shoe factory, and basically it was an empty building when we found it, and we decided that we'd do a kind of a drop-in centre, and also a kind of a support centre. So it really is where women can come in with the children if they have no food, you know, if there's no food in the house, which we're having an awful lot of at the moment. We can see what we can do to help them. And so Tiafi has grown over the last 5 years, and we feed about, we were feeding 200 a day, and now we're feeding 350 because there's a crisis in Turkey at the moment.
And I can remember you telling me as well that it's quite a waiting list that's in place. I think the last time we spoke, I think you told me there was 3,000 people alone on the waiting list. Is that still the same case? I have at the moment, I have it'll be 12,000 people on the waiting list for food parcels. 12,000, and I have no idea when we're going to be able to give them food parcels. The situation at the moment is very, very bad. The Turkish lira has dropped like a stone. So, you know, they faced war, they've had this pandemic, they've had an earthquake in Turkey, and now they have an economic crisis. I don't know how they're going to cope. So I'll give you an idea. If you're very lucky, okay, you get €8 a month. That's it. From the Turkish government?
No, it's this money that the EU were giving Turkey, right? So it's between the Red Crescent and the Turkish government. You get €8 a month. That €8 is to, so say you're a father of, say you have a husband, wife, say there's 4 of you, so 32. So you get €32 a month for the 4 of you, and you have to provide a house, electricity, water, food, clothes, on €32. That's it. That's your lot.
And so there's no assistance.
That's
direct, but there's no assistance directly coming from the Turkish government. This is money that's been funded through the European Union that's been given to the Turkish government.
Yeah, well, the Turkish government distribute it, and also the Turkish government do many. I mean, we can't blame the Turkish government. That's one thing, because the Turkish government also, say for example, they're overloaded. You know, they have 4 million refugees. The hospitals are full. They say, for example, you know, the schools are full, because the schools now you have children they're trying to put into school that don't speak the language. So you can imagine the chaos in the schools, you know. And the hospitals are just absolutely completely full, because the refugees are unwell, most of them. You know, some of them are missing limbs, some of them have psychological problems. And they get free hospital treatment in Turkey, you know, for normal things, not for physiotherapy or not for anything like that, but just for normal everyday things. So the €8 is this big money that we all talk about. You know, we talk about the big money the EU gave.
So 36 billion,
it was 7 billion that ended up, they gave about 4 billion, right? And the rest they didn't give it because of civil rights or something to that effect. So, and the Turkish government, I reckon, have spent maybe in the region of 32 or 33 billion.
I knew there was a 30 million figure.
Yeah, that's where you got that from. So at the moment then you have also, because there's an economic crisis in Turkey, the poorer people in Turkey are getting poorer, and they also need somebody to blame. So they're asking the government, why are you giving money? Why are you supporting the Syrian refugees when we have nothing? So then you can imagine.
Because in context, there was like Anne told me during the week there that the equivalent that €8 a month, like the equivalent of that is like it would allow somebody to buy a blah and a litre of milk every day, and that's it. So if you bought a blah and a litre of milk every day, all your money would be gone. So that's there's no rent coming out of that, no electricity coming out of that. So that's the kind of context of in the situation that's there now. So they're poor and get poorer.
So I suppose just to bring into the context of you in Turkey and Ben coming out. Ben, you were out in March and June last year. I know you're going to be going back out pretty early in the new year. You obviously knew each other prior to your going to Turkey. So, like, I suppose, what prompted you to travel out?
Well, my first kind of, I suppose, involvement, or connection really with the refugee crisis and the Syrian crisis was like everybody else watching on the news, and every day, children being washed up. And it was that little boy, Alan Kurdi, that was washed up in 2015, I think it was. His father was aged 2, and that image went around the world, and for a moment the world stopped. It seemed to be this was going to be the catalyst that might make a change, because everybody could identify with him. I think it was actually a beautiful little fella, and he was still in his little t-shirt and his little jeans, and so it made a connection with it. And for a moment it really brought kind of attention to the crisis. This is the reality. This is what happened to your father and his young boy, drowning. And I was painting a lot of the time, and I started to reference the refugees in it, and particularly Alan Kurdi. I did a series of paintings that I suppose, as a father myself, I was kind of thinking of, that if that was me, and that was my child, and so I tried to put it into the paintings in some kind of context. And 2017 I had a full exhibition called Boat. And in that exhibition I had used a lot of that references, and I also used an image of Icarus that I've been using, a Greek kind of mythological image of a boy. The boy who flew to the sun and ended up drowning in the Mediterranean. And I've been painting like that since 1986, and I use it as a kind of child following his dreams. And in that story, Daedalus, his father made the wings from. So it was like suddenly, I was at it probably a year and realised, the things I've been painting about since the early 80s, had a parallel here. So in the series of exhibitions, I kind of mixed up that metaphor, of somebody trying to find salvation and drowning in the Mediterranean into this very real story. And so that was a kind of connection for me. And during the lockdown, the first lockdown, there was no exhibitions, and so we had a kind of virtual exhibition that the Imagine Festival did, and they filmed me in the studio, and I spoke about that. I spoke about the Syrian paintings I was doing, and Anne saw the video on Facebook, and we reconnected. We'd known each other many years ago, and so she was home for Christmas, and we ended up going for a walk down the quay. Remember, we had to stay in our 2 meters apart, so just to give you the context of that, it was at Christmas time. And I asked her about, would it be of any use if I had done. I'd been working with children for nearly 40 years doing art and theatre stuff, but genuinely, I really didn't know what it was, because I think I said to her, you can't eat paint, and I knew the kids were, hungry. I knew there were living conditions. We were in a desperate place. And so I wasn't sure, was this going to be some kind of luxury, that we were putting in on top of it. But she thought it was a good idea, and we went out, and so we set up an art room initially. And in some ways we tried, I suppose, to, in the midst of all these difficulties, like this place she set up in Cafe is like a kind of a sanctuary. There's actual, like a lot of the NGOs that we know about, the really big ones are advocates, for change and all that, but they're not a place that people go to. Tiafi is different like that. Tiafi has hundreds every day, Syrian refugees that come in and are fed, and that's what she said. Like when I was there last, it was 200, and in the months I've been home, it's gone up to 350. But alongside that, she's got physiotherapy for kids who have no limbs. Some of them have broken limbs. Some of them were born with injuries that are the result of some chemical warfare. And she has a room upstairs where she's a whole heap of sewing machines, and she's got teaching women how to sew and kind of trying to enable empower them for this. She's a room full of computers that she got from the university, and she's trying to teach people how to do it. She's 3 classrooms on the go full time, as well as this kitchen that makes this food for me, stirring and making food. So it's a real kind of practical, kind of immediate kind of impact that she's having, with actual people, not some kind of big kind of charity. And so in the middle of that we set up this room, and it pretty quickly became kids could be kids, for a minute, and they were. I didn't know this, but they were telling me we haven't heard laughing at them before. But she said it's been a sad place.
Yeah.
And so the first week I was there, we painted big snakes and ladders on the ground, and kids are kids, and all I did really, I think, was put the kind of means to make pictures in our way. We bought a lot of markers, and with support from here, I started to write the stories, and a lot of people connected, and so we got good support. So we were able to buy all the paint, we were able to buy all the paper, we were able to. Ultimately, we were able to actually afford to pay for an art teacher who was there now, and I'm not there. Working away, and it brought, I think, a little bit of joy and a bit of probably normality, or humanity, even to a situation that's so desperate.
And Dan, what was it like for you having Ben come out, because obviously it's a familiar face as somebody from home, and doing something which hadn't been done within the central today?
I was delighted, really delighted, because first of all, because it was Ben, and secondly, being from Waterford, which was really great. And it's so lovely to see, to see somebody from home. But also Ben brought just this big bundle of joy. It was just like this when he'd come in, even the way he looks and all his mad hats and everything. The kids were just, they were just amused immediately, And a lot of the children are suffering from secondary trauma, they have, and their parents are still traumatized, so they have it really hard, And all of a sudden there's somebody that's they're going to have fun with, and they know it immediately. So it just lightened the air, because there's so much sadness going on with the refugees that sometimes it just pulls everybody down. So it lightened the air, and even, when he was painting with them and the pictures and, everything he did with the kids made the place happier. So the art room is a happy place now, which is a great thing. And I remember he was working with 2 women at one stage, and it's normal to see Ben laughing, but this was probably the first time I saw him crying. And he got very upset because it was a widow. She was very young, she just lost her husband, and the painting was...
the cast was Weeping Woman, big collage, and I did it in some ways to try and attract the women, because a lot of the kids were coming in, but you could see, that, and a lot of them, as Anne said, they're very young women.
Yeah.
So one, she'd been a nurse, and her husband had died. She nursed him. He lost both his legs in the war. She nursed him. She got him over the mountains. They came over the mountains and ended up in Tiafi. I remember Anne told me some quack had told her that if she got $1 million, he could get legs back.
Yeah.
And so she came down looking for $1 million. And naive.
I said, here it is. There you go.
In her 20s, whatever, and then, and that man, he died, he was into it too bad, he died 6 months
28,
before I got there. And then the other woman, Miriam, was a wonderful woman, and she had, Anna showed me a drawing she did, a lovely drawing with markers before I came, and it was of herself and her friend before the war, and having a bit of crack in her garden, it looked like. And then during the war, there was a picture of herself chained up with chains in the detention centre, and her dead brother and her dead 80-year-old son on the ground in front of her. And so she's helped in Tiafi now, and her daughter, Medic, is wheelchair bound, and she's a brilliant artist, really good now. She's only turned 15. So before I went, part of my mission was to work with Medic, the young girl, and we kind of did a lot of one-on-one art things, and it's been she's amazing, and she's really potential to actually be a professional artist, But her mum came in then one day to do this collage, and that was alongside the lady who's lost her husband, and so I was giving them bits of blue paper, that I tore up, and here they were sticking it on, and in my head I was thinking, knowing what they went through, and it was just, I was filled up,
I presume you've never been in an environment comparable to that before.
No, not at all, never, no. And you know, the thing is, like, I'm saying often, you know, the kids are kids, and a lot of them, you know, they don't know any better. The war in Syria has gone on over 10 years now, and a lot of those children I was with were under 10, you know, and so, like, I had a little girl who had never seen markers before, you know, and I was, and even the idea of taking the lid off, she got, you know, a bit of crack out of it, and the lid sound, she kept putting it back on, and then I had to show her what they do, you know, show her. And so she was laughing, she thought it was the most hilarious, you know, kind of thing to be drawn to see. So the kids, you know, and I said I've worked with children for years, and you know, I knew I could relate to the children even without the language and, you know, through the drawing and all that. But it's actually their parents, you know, who have something to compare. It's the parents that have such huge loss and loss of hope even. You know, that when you speak to that, you know, that woman that was in the nursery, you speak to Miriam, or all the other helpers that are there from Syria, you know, there's a man Halil who trained to be a teacher. When his village was being bombed, he actually studied under the streetlights because it was the only light left just outside Aleppo. And he's no hopes of being a teacher now. And so you meet all these, you know, professional people. Like I was doing the food van one day, this really dignified 60-year-old, I'd say, woman came along. And you knew she'd been well to do, despite the way she held herself and her dignity, you know, and she coming up looking for a bit of food, a bit of place. And that's what breaks your heart, you know, that the people who, like, obviously, you know, the kids are, as I said, they're nearly all traumatized in some way, but they haven't known it. And, you know, they're, you know, as brazen as kids everywhere in the world. But to meet those adults with such loss and such loss of hope, and that's really, you know, like I've talked to a chap who's from Damascus, who thinks he'd never see Damascus again, and his mother and father still live there, and he's no hope of going back there. And he has no hope whatsoever in his own mind of being a teacher. He's loved Shakespeare, you know, and he speaks 5 languages. And here he is in this kind of little utter squalor trying to look after his kids. And so that's really the thing that gets you there, you know, you're there messing around the floor and goofing around. I used to call it part of my job, I had to, you know, goof and act fool and bring a bit of crack. And I really did want to engage those women, and, you know, that was an emotional kind of thing, knowing what I do. And, you know, I obviously tried to hide it, you know, they didn't see me crying.
So man, to have Ben back out a second time so quickly after the marriage, Ben was back out in June, that must have been
it's great.
It must have been a kind of a put a pep in your step, or at least kept it there.
Well, I think the fact that he's not leaving me, you know, he's staying with me. He's stuck now. So whether he likes it or not now, because once you get this, you know, once you're taken in by this, it's very difficult to walk away from it.
And the reaction of the children when Ben came back the second time?
God's sake.
Was it a bit like Santa Claus?
Yeah. And I mean, even though Ben is not there, he's still left. You know, we have now an art teacher, you know, so the art teacher from sponsorship that Ben got, with the art teachers there. So the art teacher is teaching the children now, and also Malak, who's developing wonderful, and also some of the women are coming in now to do a bit of art. So, you know, we are trying to push them forward. You know, there's no point in, you can feed somebody for so long, but you need to empower them as well. So as you said, we have the sewing class, we have the IT course, we've also set up a mobile phone repair course for the women. So they're repairing mobile phones, and we've also set up the hairdressing salon. So that we're trying to teach them Turkish, empower them with regard to getting a job, and try and move them forward, you know. Our one section that I suppose would break anyone's heart is we have a section for disabled children. And we have 68 disabled children coming in on a weekly basis. And we also have a waiting list of 50, but we can't take any more in. And that's a hard section, really. Because, you know, these kids are some of them have limbs missing, and others might have scoliosis, cystic fibrosis, that type of thing. There's no, they have no money, nobody has any money, so the parents can't bring these children for physiotherapy anywhere. There's no free physiotherapy in Turkey, so they don't get any physiotherapy, and we as an NGO can't do physiotherapy, but what we can do is an exercise and flexibility program, where we have physiotherapists working with us, and they teach the parents how to exercise the children. you know. So that's one of our hardest places really. And then again, you know, when you see some of these kids, because they're disabled, they don't get in, they've nowhere to play, or they've nowhere to, you know, the mother never sees the child enjoying themselves. So we've made another section now where we have a play area for these children as well, a soft play area. And that's great, you know. So all the time we're kind of trying to push people forward, we're trying to, you know, feed people obviously, which is our big one at the moment. And like today I got a message and I got a video of somebody that had come in with 5 children, the husband taking a heart attack, and they're a year here, they had nothing, everything was gone, they had nothing left, and they had rented this empty shell of a basement, and I just got a video today. And because we get donations, because we can help, I had a family that had donated some furniture, some blankets and things, and it was great that we were able to say today, okay, you know, take the blankets and take all the furniture out of storage and bring it down to the family. So, you know, while it's very sad, there's also good bits. You know, there's also bits where you know that you're helping and you're kind of, you know, or where we finished the sewing course, say for example, and 2 of the women got a job. You know, the course that the repair the mobile phones, one of the gentlemen, even before he finished the course, he set up a little shop. But the shop is like this size, you know, it's a little counter, but it's a start, you know. So if we can do those kind of things,
and you know,
it's a good help, you know.
There's another little NGO, and we met on St. Patrick's Day. There's a German girl and 2 Iranian, and they had set up their own NGO, you know, really poor parts of Izmir as well. And I was speaking to the girl, someone that suggested her wanting to do hairdressing. And her immediate response was, is this some kind of vanity? They don't have enough food, you know, they don't have a place to live, you know, are they concerned about what their hair looks like, you know, and she thought it was, you know, a really vanity kind of project. And on the contrary, they ended up doing some, you know, setting up a place where women could get their hair done. And she told me this herself now, that she was totally wrong. She said what I gave them was a little dignity. You know, despite being hungry and despite being living in squalor, they, you know, they retain a certain, and just having their hair done, you know, was kind of this, gave them this humanity back, you know. And of course Anne's response is she went and bought a hairdressing salon and put it in place. And now, you know, she's one of the Syrian women who used to be a hairdresser, is now hairdressing for women that are in there. And, you know, that kind of impact, you know, you can't kind of, so I guess, and like I suppose it is a parallel with making paintings and the art of the children, and that, you know, what's the value of it. But it gives them that little bit of humanity, you know, that you realise that there's, you know, once you get over, you know, feeding them, and they need that hope or that bit of dignity, that bit of humanity, and things like that. That's what you're so practical, you know, in terms of land. Like this is a whole open plan 2-story building. So all the kids getting physio are there, everyone can see them. You know, they're a tiny little wall this size, the art room is there, a little wall this size, the classrooms are down there, and it's this open plan kind of community almost now. All these kind of shared kind of help that, you know, is from, you know, the computers to the sewing room to the classes to the physiotherapy to the art. They're really practical kind of things that have immediate impact in their lives, you know.
But with the hairdressing, just to be sure, we're teaching them, also teaching them, you know, so they're learning to become hairdressers. Yeah. And there's 40 already in a queue waiting to come in. Once they can learn, then they can go off and make a living for themselves.
Like these, from our perspective here in Water, all these things you're describing feel like little wins.
Yeah.
But obviously,
but they
if I'm sitting in your shoes and I'm in Izmir, these are big steps for people to be taking, because it's given them something in their lives, amongst all the other things they've been deprived of, a little bit of values and put back into their lives.
Yeah, and a bit of hope, you know. I mean, what they have to hold on to the hope, because they have suffered so much, and they are still suffering every day. I mean, Ben was thrown in very fast, because the day he arrived, you know, I at some stage said I'm going to bring him up and show him some of the places they live in, because the places they live in are scary. really scary now, right? And I mean, they're basements, they have no windows, they're just horrific, right? And the minute Ben arrived, or within a few hours, I said, Ben, come on, we'll run up, and you can tell the story of that.
Yeah, like Anne has a kind of unwritten rule with all the, like, and the staff there are Syrian people, and like, I think 5 of them have 3 or 4 languages.
Yeah.
Amazing people, you know, from amazing walks of life, who are now in, you know, such a desperate situation. But she had a kind of unwritten rule, and there's people call all the time, you know, looking for help. And I sat in on a few of those people, and it's like, you know, you're people coming in with such desperate stories, and you're saying, what can we do, tiny little bit, kind of thing. But she has an unwritten kind of rule. She told me that if anyone comes in and they're really especially, you know, in need, and or their situations are desperate, they come to one of the staff, that they inform the rest of the staff. And so within 20 minutes of meeting there, Anne got called, and you need to come and speak to this woman. And the woman literally said, and so there was translators talking to Anne, I have nothing. And so we said, what's that mean? You have nothing. What do you mean you have nothing? And she said, she was able to tell us she had 7 children. And her husband was off collecting plastic, which you see all over Israel. They collect plastic, burn it in stoves, or they sell the plastic. But she said, we need to go to her house, and we went next door to the supermarket, so fill about 3 or 4 bags of food. And on the way she said, I never do that. I never fill up bags, because you'd be no resources left in a week if all the people, you know, if you were to do that. But she said, I just had a feeling about this woman.
I knew Ben had a few more. I knew he'd pay for it, which he did. And we went up, and we got they have a banger of a kind of 7-seater, and it drives people everywhere. Like, it brings benefit to the class, it brings people into the community centre. People are living in mad places. And I described it like the Brazilian favelas in Rio. You know, it's up, little poor house on top of poor house on top of poor house, and they're kind of travelling to get up there. And then even right up in the middle of it, to get into the house, there was a step like as high as this, you know, to actually get into the house. And there was one room, it had been 2 rooms, and the second room was damaged in the earthquake that happened just before I landed. So there was a hole in that roof, so they only used this one room and a tiny kitchenette. And one room had nothing. She was right, like, they had a chair, they had the table, there was a bit of a rug on the floor, and they had some blankets they used to pull out, right, so we all slept in that one room, in that kind of empty space. And I went into the little kitchenette, and there was a few jars in there, all of them empty except one had 4 baby measles. And that was the extent of the food they had. Her husband was out collecting plastic. They had a stove there that they used to burn plastic in the stove. That was the first time I remember you kind of couldn't believe that, you know, the fumes and the kids. And so she ended up with the translator, and we talked, you know, she was talking what she's trying to say, you know, could we make a kind of impact. And I was putting chocolate spread on biscuits for the kids, you know, was that. And the following, one of the kids, he was, I remember he was wearing, what's that? He was wearing you know, red Crocs that were 5 sizes too big. They would be too big for me now. But I had red runners on, like, you know, we kind of made a connection. But he followed me after we went in, and went walking off down taking us back to the car. And I was staying with him, and we, you know, took a few photos of him and stuff. And he came into the art class the following Monday. So, and within a few days, Anne was able to contact some friends in Germany who have since then been donating at least 40 or 50 euros a month. And that looks after that person's, that family is kind of their basic needs or so. You know, you think about it in relation to the 8 a month that they're entitled to, like 50 a month will go a long way in terms of their food and the rent and electricity. So that, like, immediately is kind of thing. I remember actually leaving the day and they had no furniture. We said we have to get furniture. And as we left, we were walking in the house, somebody rang her and said, I have a few sofas to get rid of, do you know where I can put them? And she said, this is the way it works. And it's like that, it's that, like, there's no plan, you know, there's no plan. Like, what we don't go into the, you know, to Yaffe today and say, here's the family's resort. Now it's today. That day someone walked in, and, you know, by the end of that day she had furniture, and by the following Monday her kid was doing art classes, and by 3 days later someone in Germany was paying for her food.
How long do you see yourself continuing to do this? It's very difficult, and I imagine it must be very emotionally draining, and you're not at home, and that in itself must be quite problematic. It's given the extent of the problem, it's obviously, I can't imagine it's something that you're willing to probably liberate yourself from anytime soon.
It's not easy, but I have a family here, you know, a husband and 3 boys, so, you know, I have to kind of take them into account, but they're very good, and I don't think they mind me too much being away. But it is I miss them a lot, that's for sure. And I love coming home, and I love if they come out to me, you know. So it is hard, and it's also a little bit hard when after 5 years I can't see any massive improvement. I still see Syria being bombed yesterday and the day before. I don't see anything happening to change that. That can be kind of hard to take. So, you know, the situation, as I said, in Turkey is getting worse because of the economic crisis. They can afford very little now, and I mean, they can't afford to feed themselves really. So what will be the end, you know? And as long as it's like that, how can you leave it, you know?
And Ben, would you describe, I know sometimes we all have these experiences in our lives which we call, would define as life-altering, life-changing. You couldn't really have been armed with too much going out there in terms of what you were going to see. You might have had some kind of impression of it to what you're facing, but I imagine when it actually is there in your face and you're literally within minutes of arriving in Izmir in the middle of an area like that, I presume this must be a huge life-altering experience for yourself.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you know, for like as I said, I was painting about it from 2015. In fact, going back to 1986, I did a painting that was. I was in America at the time, and there was a palpable fear of World War III. It was when America bombed Gaddafi, and I was living there at the time. And I did a painting, and it was about a child's drawing of a boat that I'd seen in water, and I kind of put the two together as, you know, this a child's creativity in the middle of this, you know, desperate kind of world, you know, that is dangerous world, you know. And, you know, in intervening years, I painted about the children in Gaza and Palestine, and, you know, so children trying to be children, doing their thing in this kind of desperate kind of world. And so in some ways I started painting about the Syrian children, you know, in 2015. And so when the opportunity came to actually be able to go, you know, something I kind of knew was, you know, I had to do it. You know, it was like, you know, I was able to do more than talk to talk or paint to paint. You know, it was an opportunity to actually go and try and make a difference, whatever difference you can, you know. And as I said to you, genuinely at the start, I didn't know whether it was a good idea, really, you know. And so, yeah, I mean, it definitely would have had a profound effect, and I do think I'll be going back there, you know, for a long time. And hopefully bringing people with me, you know, when I go back in April and bring a few other artists with me. And as part of the art, we set up an artist studio there. So the idea is that years to come, artists from all over the world can come, do their own work while they're in the centre, you know, in exchange for, you know, helping out with the kind of things and raising awareness of that. As Anne said, I mean, it's getting worse, not better. You know, for all the huge impact that we've made, and I think we have made a broad bit of joy there for sure. But, you know, even when I was there was, like, one day she turned me into a bodyguard. They were giving out food parcels. She said, "You're tall, stand there." And I was literally outside the door talking to the old Romanian women, telling them, "Sorry, with COVID, you have to wear a mask, you can't go." And they were overwhelmed with people coming looking for food parcels. And like, it nearly got dangerous, you know, because there was the tensions, she said, there where some of the local people are saying, "No, you're feeding those Syrians, you're not giving anything to us." Or there were many people, you know, kind of gypsy people who were, you know, came down and heard a free parcels going in Tiafi, you know, and literally kind of come on and, you know, don't take no for an answer, like, you know, and so you're in that situation, you know, and because I was tall, she said, "You're a bouncer." Don't let them in. And so we were letting them in one at a time, they were having to register and all of that kind of, you know, so there's a difficulty there, and that kind of side of things is probably getting worse. In terms of the relationship between the Turkish people, as you said, there's 4 million refugees. Like, that's the population of Ireland, you know, nearly. If there was, imagine all of Ireland landing in, you know, in a place, you know. So that's the kind of context of it, I suppose. But as I say to Anna, often, we can only do what we can do. And sometimes you do what comes in front of you, like that day I described. You know, like something happens there, I can do something about that, so you do that. And you know, like when Anne came home this time, when I met her first, like I could see she's completely overwhelmed with, you know, the new prices. That's why since I came home, I went from 200 meals to 350 meals a day. So like that obviously takes its toll, you know, and you can't be upbeat and upset. So it probably needs, you know, the likes of we used to call it goofing around that I was doing to bring it in. But like while that was going on, there was like people, you know, all the time coming in for food parcels. I managed to get 1,500 hygienic parcels, you know, when COVID hit. So there was all this cleansing stuff, you know, that they were all being handed out. But you nearly had to be clandestine in doing this, because if people saw people leaving Tiafi with bags of free stuff, you know, you were thronged.
Yeah.
And you know, so it's like, logistically, even alone at that, you know, it's quite an achievement what she's doing. You know.
Conscious of time, I'm gonna ask
fine.
one more question. I suppose, in terms of the year ahead, since we're at the end of another difficult year, and a far more difficult year in Turkey and Syria than it has been in Ireland, despite what people at home might say, what would be your hope if there was one thing that could happen in the 12 months ahead that hasn't happened up to now in your experience with Tiafi? What would your biggest hope be?
My hope is that they'll stop bombing Syria. That's my wish. If I had a wish, if I could have a wish come true, to stop bombing Syria. So.
Well, on that note, I want to say thanks to Ben. Thanks very much, Dan. It's great to finally meet you face to face. And thanks to Thomas behind the camera over there, and to Jenna and Goma and our select audience joining us here this evening.